you so much, Piero. First of all, to thank you on behalf of IPIFF for the invitation. It's our pleasure to be here today at AgroInsecta 2023. I'm Stephen Barbosa, the IPIFF Deputy Secretary General, and today I would like to give you a short introduction to what is the International Platform of Insects for Food and Feed, the current status of the insect sector today, what is the current EU legislative framework, and also some of the regulatory bottlenecks we are working together with our members and with European institutions to unleash the further potential of the European insect sector. So I would like to start by explaining a bit of our membership base. So as you can see here, our members are mostly insect producers, but as well, all these actors active in the entire value chain of insects, not forgetting research organizations which take part in our knowledge platform with the objective to fill in the knowledge gaps where we need to advance policy. Also, we have a number of national associations of insect producers in our platform. Today, we represent 76 members, and we are their voice towards European institutions with the objective of consolidating dialogue with the European Commission, European Parliament, and other institutions towards advocating appropriate legislative framework for the development of our sector, while at the same time supporting the EU legislator to implement effectively the legislation and promote and develop clear standards and best practices, while at the same time collaborating with other umbrella organizations active in the agro-food sector. If you don't mind, Piero, I will just turn on the sound. Oh, no. So currently today, the European insect sector represents more than 1.5 billion euros in investment, being mostly constituted by small and medium enterprises. To mention that the sector has passed a critical threshold and is set to be marked as commercially interesting. Production is scaling up to meet the needs of food, feed, and soil fertilizer markets while building up know-how. We have a large diversity in types of farms, operational sizes, and production models. And we have an increasing level of integration with several other production systems, including partnerships with traditional farmers or other agro-food industries. Today, the sector represents 3.5 thousand jobs, including 1,000 direct jobs. I'm sorry, Piero, I don't know if you could turn on the sound or turn off the sound, because I'm hearing some background noise.
Yes, I switch off the sound.
Thank you so much, Piero. Apologies for that. So to explain what are the perspectives for the development of the European insect sector today. The recent evolutions experienced by European insect producing companies are now shaping their ability to contribute to address the current deficit in new domestic protein production. And the new policy legislative initiative set by the European Commission represents a window of opportunity for a better acknowledgement of the European insect sector and their contribution. By the end of this decade, there will be a significant spike in the number of insect farmers producing above 10,000 tons per year, thereby developing for the first time large-scale operations. The number of European livestock farmers who decide to diversify their commercial activities towards insect production, namely referring to what I mentioned before, partnerships with traditional farmers, is also set to increase. So what are the main challenges ahead of the sector? So scaling up still remains the main challenge, with the economy of scale that should be fueled through substantial investments in breeding and processing technologies. There are also efforts to document and communicate on insect production credentials that should be stepped up, and efforts should provide an incentive for European feed manufacturers, farmers, and consumers to prioritize the use of such food and feed sources. Nevertheless, we still have some regulatory constraints at EU level that I will pass on to explain further on. In this slide, I give you just an overview of some of the main milestones for the European insect sector. So starting by mentioning that in 2012, the United Nations Agricultural Agency expert group explores the potential of insects as food and feed and recommends the setup of an international insect protein industry association. By 2013, several companies decide to launch a project for the constitution of European Organization for Insect Sectors. In 2015, the European Food Safety Authority does a risk profile opinion on insects as food and feed. And in the same year, the European Commission adopts the EU Novel Food Regulation, which will allow the authorization of insect as food. In April 2015, IPIFF is formally created as the EU umbrella organization for insect producers. In 2016, the EU member states approved the European Commission proposal to authorize insects in aquafeed, which becomes effective on the 1st of July of 2017. And by 2017, IPIFF hosts its first international conference. Just to mention that last week, during the 14th and 15th of November, IPIFF hosted its last annual conference with the participation of representatives of the European Commission, European Parliament, European Social Economic Committee, and relevant stakeholders from the different sectors of the agri-food business. In 2018, there are the first novel applications covering insects being submitted towards its authorization. In 2019, the European Commission receives, on behalf of IPIFF, the guide on good hygiene practices to set a standard for the whole sector at the EU level. And by May 2020, the European Union publishes the EU Farm to Fork strategy that will set a new window of opportunity for a better acknowledgement of the insect sector. By 2021, we already have the EU novel food authorization, the first EU novel food authorization for insect as novel food. In the same year, we have very interesting developments with the authorization of insects for the feeding of poultry and swines, and the setting of EU harmonized standards for insect frass as sole fertilizer. Today, as I mentioned, we have 76 members from 24 countries, out of which 14 representing EU member states. So now, what is the current legislative framework? Farmed insects are considered by the EU legislator as farm animals as any other animal. Therefore, we must oblige to the Animal Byproducts Regulation. This means that insect farming is an agricultural activity listed in Annex 1 of the Treaty of Functioning of the European Union, and therefore, all insect activities should fall under the scope of the agricultural rules, such as organic legislation, rural development programs under the Common Agricultural Policy. So there are also requirements at EU level on substrates of animal origin to be used as feed for insects. Considering the Animal Byproducts Regulation that we must oblige to, there are certain specifications, and as well Regulation 767/2009, which forbids the feeding of feces and separate digestive tract content, or even the Regulation of 999/2001 that prohibits the feeding of insects with any other PAPs except fish meal. Last but not least, Regulation 142/2011, which excludes firmer foodstuffs containing meat and fish for the feeding of insects, which is a big regulatory blockage that we wish to unleash very soon. So just to mention that, considering insect novel food authorizations, to mention that 20 novel food applications have been submitted for its appreciation by the European Food Safety Authority, with 13 ongoing applications, out of which there were already published 7 safety assessment opinions by European Food Safety Authority, covering 4 different species, being yellow mealworm, lesser mealworm, Locusta migratory, house cricket. And out of these 7 EFSA opinions, we have already 6 authorized insect novel food products to be commercialized in the EU market. There are also regulations setting the baseline standards for insect frass as sole fertilizer. So Regulation 2021/1926 2025 sets EU standards for insect press to be treated at 70 degrees at least for 60 minutes, and also sets microbiological standards, which entered into force in 28th of November 2021. The EU legislator also introduced a definition for frass, insect frass. Over here in the slide, I give you a short overview of the regulatory insects in animal feed, corresponding to what I mentioned before, aquafeed, animals that still constitute a very important market for the insect producers. So now I would like to give you a short introduction. What are the major blockage in terms of regulation at EU level that we are working on to advance the sector? So just to give you, by starting to give you a short context, based on the agri-food challenges that the European Union faces today, with 50 million tons of food waste generated in the EU, with the COVID pandemic and the Russian aggression in Ukraine, which highlighted the vulnerabilities of the EU food system supply chains, the European Union realized that efforts were needed to accelerate the transition towards more sustainable diets and increase of domestic production of key commodities. Therefore, one of the major milestones in policy development at the European Union level was the Farm to Fork strategy. Published in May 2020, aims to make Europe the global pioneer of food system that is fair, healthy, and environmentally friendly, setting targets for reducing the use of fertilizer, food waste, or nutrient loss, and ensuring that 25% of agricultural land is under organic farming by 2030. So what we advocate for, what we are trying to work together with European institutions. We are trying to make the food produced in Europe goes to waste, and considering that as well that 30% of the food waste generated in the EU could be suitable for insect farming activities, we hope that the European institutions realize the important contribution of insect farming activities towards the food waste reduction targets set by the European Commission. Also, in its policy objectives, the European Union tries to make Europe more reliant and self-sufficient, and therefore we have to mention the important contribution that insects can have in reducing the dependency of imported protein for both food and feed. Therefore, we can have a much added value contribution for one of the transversal initiatives under the Farm to Fork strategy, which is the EU Contingency Plan on Food Supply and Food Security. Also, the European Commission mentions that feeding a growing population, while not at the expense of agricultural land, when taking consideration that 68% of the total agricultural land in the Europe is used for animal production, here also again, insects can have a very much added value contribution to the setting of a sustainable food system framework, with insect farming activities being based in circular practices, upcycling what would be considered food waste into valuable protein sources, not mentioning the much less reduced use of land or water and reduced greenhouse gas emissions. So what are the bottlenecks that we are trying to work and to surpass it so we can have further developments in the sector? I will start by mentioning the registration of processed insect press under the EU fertilizers legislation, which would give full EU market access to use of Insecta as a fertilizing product, with the reform expected by the end of 2024 and first half of 2025. Also, the setting of EU regulatory standards for insect organic production, with ongoing discussions with European Commission and IPIFF for the authorization, and as well the authorization of using of conventional insect proteins in organic aquaculture. And to mention here, the very recent recommendation on behalf of the consultative body to the European Commission, DG Mare, the Aquaculture Advisory Council, recommending the use of conventional insects in organic aquaculture. New rules could be placed by the European Commission as from the end of 24, first half of 20. Also to mention that European Commission proposal in view of including more feeding substrates to be legally applicable for insect farming, including those former foodstuffs which has residues of fish and meat. which depends on the final conclusions of a future food safety assessment to be conducted by the European Food Safety Authority. The European Commission may table a regulatory proposal by the early 2026. I'm sorry, Piero, I don't know if we can.
Yes, I think we need to close now your presentation because so if you just wish to give your final sentences and then stop sharing when you're finished, if you please.
Of course, just to mention that we are working hard in these regulatory bottlenecks and the widening scope of feeding substrates, the setting of standards of organic production methods for insect farming, and the inclusion of insect pests as part of the fertilizer legislation can be a milestone for development of the sector. And last but not least, we're working very hard in the acknowledgement of insect farming activities and its inclusion in the next common agricultural policy and the EU protein strategy, with greatest developments by the recent European Parliament report, also and the future agri-food promotion policy, or even in the EU cohesion policy, considering the role of insect farming activities towards rural and regional development. Okay, Piero, I'm sorry. I hope I was clear. I hope it was useful, my presentation. And I would like to thank you once again for the invitation.
Yes, Stephen, your presentation was almost always loud and clear. So everything went properly. So thank you. And please interrupt your sharing. Lovely. And so thank you very much again.
Thank you very much. Just to mention, Piero,